Hi, this video is going to be using soft slabs, and I'm showing the process of making a teapot with a spout, a hollow handle, collar, lid, and footring. Because this video is making a more advanced form, if you are not familiar with how to make a really good cylinder and make it neatly and everything, I would highly recommend that you start with some of my simpler videos first. I will put a link in the video description, but on how to make a cylindrical cup or the cylindrical bowl would be a good place to start before you go to something more advanced like a teapot. I'm going through some of these rolling processes more quickly. I've sped it up in this particular video. I roll and flip and rotate the clay to stretch it in multiple directions so it will fit my patterns. And I constantly release it from the table because it wants to get stuck to the canvas. And then I rib it with some ribs. Here I'm using mud tool ribs. Again, you can follow me on Amazon or check in the Google Doc for links to those tools. Now that my clay is ribbed, I'm going to go ahead and texture. For the texturing here, I'm using an MKM wooden texture roller. These are wonderful little rollers. I have some links in the Google Doc to those, and also I have them noted on my Amazon influencer storefront. Now with the clay textured, I will put my patterns on top and cut it out with a needle tool. I prefer to use a needle tool when I'm cutting out patterns because a knife sometimes can get hung up on the edge of the pattern, but the needle tool just rides against the side of it. I'm going to turn the textured bottom over, and I'm going to bevel. I'm using the Sim or Xiam bevel cutter. I am going to use the larger of the two bevels. I do like to make sure that it really overlaps well. And you can see that now I'm scoring the bevels that are going to overlap. I score the bottom edge of the side, the interior edge of the side on the bottom, and the top of the base. All right, I've prepped the top of the bottom, and I've prepped the two beveled sides and the bottom edge and just the inside of the bottom edge of the wall. So everything is scored. Now I'm just adding some slip. And I'll just rescore. I like to really make sure I have a great connection here. And going to build this on top of the base. Since I'm using a round base to begin with, I'm being very careful to make sure that I'm keeping the form round to match that original round shape of that base. All right, so I've now put my two bevels together on the wall, and I'm going to just take the end of a knife and blend. I love the rounded end of those Kemper wooden knives for that blending of the seams. It's a nice gentle tool to do that. All right, so I have the inside of the seam is blended, and now I'm going to add a coil down in the area where I scored. I'm rolling a coil that's probably about as thick as a pencil on this, and then I'm scoring it, and then I will slip it and put it in the bottom. The reason I have scored all the way around the coils is because when I put it in the pot, it might rotate, and I just want to make sure that scoring is down in the corner. And now I'm just placing the scored and slipped coil down in the bottom corner. Okay, now I have the coil laying down in there, and now I'm going to blend. And I'm using the same rounded end of the wooden knife for blending that I did for the side seam. All right, now I have it blended, and now I just need to smooth it. I'm going to turn this sideways and smooth a little bit more. Don't forget, if you're interested in these tools, I do have links in my Amazon influencer storefront and on the Google Doc that's in the video description. But these are great for blending. All right, now I have that coil blended on the inside. Now, I would like to billow this out a little bit, and just like I did in the cylinder and the bowl video, I'm going to hold my fingers at the top and bottom of the wall. Sometimes it's helpful if you have a little water on your fingers so they slide freely on the inside of the wall as you billow it out. This clay is very, very plastic today, so this is pretty much the last step that I'm able to do on this day. The reason that I keep my fingers at the top and the bottom of the wall is it keeps me from stretching out those areas. I just want to stretch the middle part. One of the keys when stretching and rounding a form is to really look at it and make sure that it is uniform all the way around and looks equivalent. Now, I have to give the wall a little bit of time to stiffen up before I can make the curve on the bottom. So I'm going to allow this to stiffen just a little bit before I come back. I actually never recommend the use of a hairdryer with my students because they have a difficult time regulating how fast it's drying. Normally, I would just allow it to dry exposed for a couple of hours, but I was in a pinch to try to get this built within a half an hour, so I took a hairdryer to it. All right, my walls have now stiffened up enough that I can hold it without really causing much damage. And now I can go ahead and stretch the base like I wanted to. So the idea is when you're stretching the bottom, I want to really kind of round this interior corner by pushing my thumb right up against it. And I'm just trying to really round it on the interior. I want to make sure that this has more of a roundish appearance and less of a flat slab appearance. I'm going to take a roller, kind of roll down this edge a little bit to make sure that it embeds into the wall. And if I want to, I can retexture a little bit. And here I'm just trying to put a little bit of finishing touch on the actual shape to get it rounded, cleaning it up some. I am placing it inside of a bowl just to offer it a little bit more support. I just don't want to place it directly on the bottom and flatten it out. I'm trying to keep that bottom curved. My goal will be to get this leather hard or very close to leather hard, and then I can put the top panel on. And this is the circular panel which will become the top collar. And here I am just laying out and going to rib some clay and then retexture it in order to cut the spout out of this. So in my classroom I have a basic teapot spout pattern. For anyone that's ever done any sewing, it looks somewhat like a sleeve of a garment. I know this is significantly larger than I actually need, so I am going to not cut it the entire length, but I will shorten this end here. And this is only an approximation because when you are putting a spout on, you always cut it to actually match the form a little bit more. And here I'm beveling both edges of the spout, just like when you're making a cylinder, you bevel the ends. I'm scoring and slipping. And then as I ease it together, you want to kind of put it together slowly, and you want to make sure that the bevels are overlapping. I have some of these hardwood spout makers, and it's really just like a tapered dowel. You could use a dowel rod or the end of a paintbrush on the inside, but I have some of these in my classroom, so show my kids that I can use those. And then making sure that it's overlapping. And I'm even going to run the texture roller right over that seam a little bit. Okay, now I am going to blend the interior because down in there, I don't know if you can see it, but that is a pretty pronounced seam. So I'll take a small tool and blend and smooth. And here I'm just speeding this up, but I'm really blending the interior of that seam quite well on both sides of the spout. Then I'm going to smooth it out on the inside with a paintbrush. Now, for the tip of this, I usually thin the rim a little bit more. If I did this again, I would have thinned it before I rolled it up, and I would have made the spout a little bit thinner and skinnier at the end. And then when you think about how it sits on the body, I usually like to have a little bit of a belly. So with my finger on the inside, this is where the seam is up here. I'm going to stretch this and kind of belly out the bottom end of the spout. And I'm just continuing to stretch the base of the spout to make it even all the way around. So I add almost a twist or just a slight bend. I like to make it so it's not really stiff looking like a cone. But again, I'll put a little twist on it like that so it will come up and flow out. And I will store this with the teapot and get them both leather hard. Now I'm going to show how to make a hollow handle, and I have a pattern here. I use the same handle for, say, like a pitcher handle like this one, or a teapot handle. I just lengthen it for the teapot. So in the case of this one, I've textured my slab already, and I like to make sure that it extends a little bit beyond there for the teapot. I'm going to bevel the two long edges, just like with the cylinder. So the bevels are going to be overlapping, and then of course I'm going to score and slip both of the beveled edges. Now, when you go to put together the handle, the trick is you want to allow it to begin to curve, and you have to kind of gently coax it into meeting as you are trying to curve it. So as I begin to overlap these, you can see how it's kind of coming together. And I'm not really terribly worried about making it super clean because that seam is going to be on the underneath side. And I don't mind the seam visible. And of course I'm arching it around. I'm just retexturing a little bit right there. And then I arch it. I will be storing it on a tray. Now this one, after I did this one, I realized that's just maybe a little bit fatter than I really wanted. So I usually do a couple handles just like I do with a mug. I'm going to do a second one, but this time I'm going to thin it out just a little bit more than I did on the first one. So you can see the difference between the handle and the teapot there, that the one on the teapot is physically a lot skinnier. So I'm just thinning it. I was just kind of stretching it by, tossing it on the table. Rib, and then I'm going to texture it. in the same manner. Oh, I wanted to get it a little bit thinner and a little bit longer there, so adding a little bit of texture. And now as I use this pattern, I'm going to go longer, and then I'm going to thin out the sides. So I'm going to take a little bit more off on the sides. And now that I have it cut, I'm going to bevel the same way that I did on the first one, beveling both the sides so they're going to match up, score, and then I'll slip. And again, I'm focusing on kind of gently curving it, kind of coaxing it around, trying to get it into that rounded handle shape as I'm putting together the seamed edges. And again, I do recommend that you make a couple handles. You will inevitably always have one handle that looks a little bit better than the other, and you'll have a better selection to choose from. And what I will do is I will store this on a plastic tray covered with a bag, and I'll get it to be the same moisture as the rest of the pot. I want to allow everything to dry together and become the same moisture. Now I'm just going to wrap all the parts together tightly in a bag so the moisture will even out between them all, so I can add them when they're the same moisture. Okay, so I've been storing my spout in the upper flange slab and the teapot for a couple of days, wrapped up tightly, and it is now leather hard. Now that it is a little bit stiffer, I can redefine the bottom a little bit more. I'm going to just take a rounded rib and kind of come in here and make sure that this looks even from the exterior. So as I push that out, I want to make sure that it looks pretty good, pretty even. And I'm really compressing right on the seam where I put those two together. And here I'm just continuing to round it to really refine that form. Okay, now the initial slab that I cut out, I think I'm going to trim that down a little bit. It's just a little larger than I was hoping it would be. And with this sped up a little bit, I'm just trimming down the size of the circle a little bit to make it a little smaller. And after looking at it, I want to then go ahead and cut the middle, but first I'm going to mark so I can then put the circular template dead center and then cut out the middle. All right. So using a little drafting template, I cut out the hole for the lid. Now I'm going to take, I just have some bisque molds that I made, a drape mold. I'm going to drape this collar, I'll call it a collar, on this teapot. So it curves and angles down the way that I would like it to. There we go. And just speeding this up a little bit where I just am shaping it to that domed contour. And then I can put this on there. I just need to make sure that it's level and centered. And the attachment part would be like attaching anything. You need to make sure that you're scoring and slipping really well. I'm being very, very active with the scoring that I'm doing. And there I'm just applying some slip. And then just need to make sure it's big enough. And I'm also going to do the top edge of the wall. Same thing. Really making sure this is going to be a good tight connection. Slipping that. Then I'm actually rolling a coil, scoring the entire coil, slipping that, and I'm placing it between them. So it's a squishy coil that's going to be between the collar and the wall. I forgot to mention that I blended the coil to the side of the wall before I put the collar on. Okay, now I'm looking across this so I can get this level. And then where I put the coil in there, and I blended it already to the teapot body, now I can take the coil and blend it upward into the collar as well. And again, I just want to speed this part up a little bit, but I'm blending blindly. I can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just blending that as smooth as I can with my finger, making sure that the edges look good. Now I'm going to flatten out some clay because I need a little bit more so I can make a foot ring. I could have used the slab sticks. I just am just kind of winging it there by throwing it out. Texturing, and then I'm using one of the hardwood slab sticks to make the height of my foot ring. So I know it's even. I cut the ends at a bevel, and then I try that out. I decided to take a little bit more off, and I know that the beveled ends will overlap. I slip and score it and blend those. And then I'm going to roll out a bit more clay. This time using slab sticks and texturing. And this will be the template for the lid. This circle, of course, is larger than the opening that I have already cut. And I'm also going to put that on the dome so I know it's going to form the same dome shape. And here I'm just cutting a strip, which will be the flange for the interior of the lid, which sticks down in the pot, and it gives it some weight and it holds the lid on. So I've reversed the mold now, and I put the lid on the inside. I've made my flange, just like the foot ring, slipped and scored, and attached that, and blending it a little bit with a little bit of slip. Adding an interior coil that I've scored and slipped, and I'm blending that as well. That will give it a little bit of extra strength to have that little coil in there. And now here I'm just kind of placing and flaring the foot ring on that domed mold to get a sense of what it'll look like on the bottom of the rounded teapot. And after I like the form of that foot ring, I set it to the side to stiffen. And here it has stiffened up for a little bit, and I'm going to be attaching by scoring and slipping the foot ring to the bottom of the pot, adding a little coil, and blending it for a little bit more stability. And I'm just taking a paintbrush and cleaning up different things on the outside. Now, when you're ready to attach a spout, you want to think about how you're going to place the spout on there, what kind of angle, how tall it's going to be. So here you can see I'm holding it behind the pot body, and I'm keeping the opening of the spout to be higher than the level of the liquid that will be in the top body. If the spout is down too low, the liquid will dribble out. And you want to think about it not being too long, so I'm holding it behind it so I can get a sense of the contour that I'm going to be cutting the end of the spout. I always make the spout bigger, and then I end up by needing to mark it and trim away some to put it on and attach it at an angle. So I have marked it there with my knife, and now you can see I'm shaving it definitely at an angle because I need the spout to have an uplift. Again, sometimes beginners put their spout sticking straight out, and the liquid can only be filled up halfway in the teapot. Now here I'm really working on the contour to make sure that the contour is going to match the pot body. Okay, you can see it's curved to match the pot body. And then I'm going to mark the exterior of this. Now, marking the exterior is just an indication of where the outside is going to be. That's not where I'm cutting the hole. And different people cut the holes differently sometimes with teapots. Some people do small holes and they do a strainer. I don't. I use a T-ball instead. So I'm going to cut an interior hole, which is bigger, so the tea just flows and passes right through. And then I'm going to kind of just punch that out. And then I'm doing it at a bit of a bevel, so the hole gets wider as it goes in there, and it helps the tea to kind of flow out more naturally. And then, of course, scoring and slipping both the end of the spout where it attaches and the pot body. And I often add one extra thing here when I'm hand building a teapot. I sometimes will add a little coil, which is what I'm going to do here. Because these walls are pretty thin, right? It's only 1/4 of an inch in thickness. I'm rolling a coil. I'm going to score and slip the coil, and then I'm going to firmly attach it to the pot body itself before I attach the spout. It just gives you a little bit more stability, so when you go to attach it, it gives you a little squishy extra bit of clay there. And I hold my hand on the inside of the pot as I firmly push it against it. I want to make sure again it has the uplift that I need it to have. You don't want it to be sticking out too horizontally. It needs to be straight too. You don't want it to be crooked when you put it on. That's an important factor. And when cleaning it up, I use a paintbrush and really seal that, make sure it looks clean and tidy. I always like to make sure that I'm pushing firmly on the interior against the wall to make sure it's really well connected. Now for the handle, you can see that I have to modify that angle to get it to match onto the collar. So just like modifying the spout, you have to get it the contour to match. So you also want to make sure that this is also completely aligned with the spout. You don't want it to be off and crooked. That's always disappointing. And when I make sure that my angle looks like it's matching and I'm clearing the lid, I set the lid on there to make sure that I knew I wasn't hitting the lid, then I will attach it similar to the way that I attached the spout. Score and slip, rolling a coil, and just a really firm attachment. Now, because this is a hollow handle, one thing, I'm not too sure if I show it here in the video, but I do take a needle tool and I will pierce it and make one simple needle tool hole someplace in the handle, so it will act as a little vent hole, since right now it's just trapped air. But of course, make sure it's very thoroughly dry before you fire it too. Now I'm just doing a little alteration on the tip. I probably wouldn't do this again. I don't think it poured as well once I did this. It made it a little too wide, I think. But I was just doing a little decorative and cleaning it up with a paintbrush. And now for the lid, I wanted to think about creating a handle which kind of mimicked the handle of the teapot. So I'm using a small little coil, texturing it, and I'm arching it, so it's going to look a little bit like the arched handle. And then I size it and make sure it looks okay before I score and slip this on. So there you can see, that's what that looks like. And then I'm going to score and slip this. And that's the process I use on making a slab teapot. Don't forget to follow me on Amazon or check out the Google Doc links, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments.